reduce our cost base of the organisation. So obviously, from an executive perspective, we felt that the best way that we could actually do what was needed from looking at the cost base was making sure that we've actually got a consistent framework and the areas of the business and the way that framework or the way those service reviews were taken was in a consistent manner across the organisation. And so as a collective executive, we thought that was all a great idea. However, we also acknowledged the fact that we probably didn't necessarily have the time to actually focus our energies to actually develop the framework to give it justice. So that's where we incorporated it in as part of the internal audit program and asked Bentley's to undertake the work. Mm-hmm. I think the framework document is probably a fairly self-explanatory document. Yep. I think that the key component of the framework, which Bentley's did a really good job at taking, I suppose, my initial thoughts of what I was actually looking for and translating that into a tool, is the prioritisation tool. And the purpose of that prioritisation tool is just to make sure that we're actually focusing our energies on the areas of the business that will actually make that biggest impact, rather than spending a lot of time and effort on an area of the business that's already high value, low cost, yep. And spending time and effort on something that wasn't necessarily going to deliver what we actually need to deliver. So I think that the key element of that, of the tool and the framework is actually that prioritisation. At this point in time, so at where we're at with regard to the tool, so we've actually gone through and identified, pretty much taken the high level services that we've actually broken it down into the annual business plan, mm-hmm. For the budget. And as an executive team, we're independently going through the tool and assessing those projects, yep. With a view to identify and come up with a plan as to what areas of the business we'll look and how we'll actually tackle those areas of the business which we think need some attention and then can deliver some, I suppose, some underlying efficiencies and savings that we need to do as we move through the journey, I'll use the term journey, mm-hmm. to come back to financial sustainability.
Yep. Thank you.
I don't know if, Peter, did you want to add anything, or Dongju?
Yes, so we did this service review framework in October. So Peter and we had 2 workshops with management team, including executives and managers from all departments of the council. So in the first session, we explained the fundamental principles of the framework, and then the possibility to develop a prioritization tool. And then in the second session, we facilitated a smaller group discussion to go through the 5 value concepts. So all the attendees got opportunities to give their opinions, thoughts on the questions, the wording, and the weightings after the 2 workshops, and we went back and drafted the framework, including the prioritization tool, and then made further changes after more feedback. So we take the report as read. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Christine?
My first comment is I thought this was really good in providing a framework for people to follow as a guideline. So just a couple of questions. I'm on page 69 of our package, which is page 6 of the report, section 2, roles and responsibilities. And at the bottom of the box, it says service review team, and then there's a little note 1 next to it, and I couldn't find note 1. So just wondering if that was meant to be there, or any further explanations? Maybe it can just be deleted.
Yep, I think you're right. I think we had put a note there, but I think due to further refinements and comments that came through, that note would have been removed or deleted, but then that one remained in there, so that can be adjusted.
Okay. And then on that same page, there's a green box called Service Team. Is that supposed to be Service Review Team or? Yeah, okay. And then my other question is on page 71, which is page 8 of this report, and it's talking about the phase and process. I'm just wondering whether the Audit and Risk Committee has a role to play in these phases, because there is some mention back on page 69 that the Audit and Risk Committee does have a role to review and recommend significant organisational changes and service level changes. So I'm just wondering whether we should be in that phase and process all those steps, or are we just general?
Sharon?
I think that I'm more than happy to incorporate a particular phase, but I think that under the terms of reference within the Audit and Risk Committee anyway, all those service review frameworks and the service review documents would actually come back to the Audit Committee prior to actually, so in between that undertaking consultation and that, like that seeking council endorsement and all that sort of stuff, that would actually come through through the Audit Committee.
Oops, hang on to the... Yep. Your microphone's gone off. Just put your button back on.
Last question. In the community benefit, it does talk about financial impact, but I was just a bit unclear at what phase there's an assessment of financial impact. So is it early on, or do you wait until you've done a few other steps and then look at finances a bit later?
I'm just trying to...
Which page is that?
Well, I was looking for, I guess, a few words around...
Oops, hang on, now I've just pressed it again.
Which page is that?
I didn't write down the page. It was the different aspects you look at, and one of them is community benefit value. Oh, hang on.
Okay, on the value scoring, that should be on from 73, going down.
I've scribbled page 75, yeah, where there's all the different percentages and things. So I found a bit in there about financial impact, but I was just wondering, is that the only place we look at financial impact, or does that come through in the business case? So just trying to work out where financial considerations fit into this framework.
Okay, good. So this is more aligned to the prioritization tool, which Sharon alluded to earlier. And the way the tool has been designed, it's assessing the service based on the financial value against these benefits, of which one of them is community benefit. So we haven't explicitly put in those risk elements to the financial aspect of it,
Yep.
because that amount will be derived at the inception. So once they identify the services, and then they will do internal consultations and come up with a budget of how much, from a historical perspective, it has costed to perform those services. And that will be the underlying fundamental element on the cost. And then once they then gauge these other benefits against that, it then ranks where that service sits in comparison with the other services that they are looking at in that bracket.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that helps.
Yeah, can I add to that? So on page 73, so at the bottom, complete the value scoring tool. So we, like in the prioritization tool, so there's a design there to put the cost. The first dot point under the point 3, use the input sheet cost to populate the estimated expenditure for each service.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry, Sharon. Oh.
Yeah, so I think the questions in relation to community benefit and the weightings is actually being used to actually assess the value of the service, not necessarily the financial cost of it. And then essentially then the cost is actually overlaid to actually put that to determine whether it's a high value, low cost. Because obviously what we actually want to do is to sit there and say, in the end, what we want everything to be high value, low cost, but we acknowledge the fact that not everything can be high value, low cost. There might be things that are valued, but because of the nature of the service, they are actually a high cost. So it's making sure that we are focusing on those areas of the business that are actually of value, rather than just sort of sitting there saying, okay, this is my gut feel, I think we should look at that. So those questions in the tool is that initial thing about let's work out where they actually sit on the quadrant, and that takes into account the budget, and then obviously the service review. Once we actually identify that program, that's when all the financial, like the financial analysis will actually be undertaken. So this tool is just initially to sit there and say, okay, well, which part of the business should we focus on, rather than doing the scattergun approach, pretty much. Structure and some science behind and that justification as to why we do, and making sure that there's actually a common understanding as well, as to sit there and say what I suppose as an organisation, what we believe that the community values as well, because you don't want to necessarily take away, put a lot of focus on something, considering to take it away if it's actually considered a high value service that's actually provided, and if it's a high cost, then our challenge is how do we actually bring it down.
Chris?
Christine, just to give you another level of comfort, that cost is considered, just on page 74, it just articulates what Sharon was just saying. So prioritisation, top of the page, based on the value score and cost, and then it proceeds to just articulate what Karen mentioned about the comparative high value, etc.
Yeah, and I think that's good because, I mean, using limited resources, if something's low value, then, you consider whether it's worth reviewing if, there's got a low value to the community. Are there any other questions or comments?
I suppose that understanding that low value as well is to sit there and say, okay, well, it might be a Monty to sit there and say, question why are we doing it?
Yeah, why are we doing it?
And I think that's some of those questions as well, is to sit there and say, why are we providing it if it's actually of low value, especially if it's low value, high cost. Yes, we acknowledge that there may be some low value, high cost services that we have to, because there's legislative requirements, but anything that's not legislative, and that's sitting in that quadrant, we should really be questioning ourselves as to why we actually even providing those services as well.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Shanks.
This might be a silly question. So when we're going to the measure and we're making the decision, how much value does this add to the community? We're talking through some of these sort of higher level, impact on social, economic, cultural. It's going to be down to the person that is doing the evaluation more or less at the time, and a different person might evaluate something different. So I guess, how are we doing that catch-all, and then are we then using the tool and getting to that service review and doing that elected member workshop piece where, hey, this is the back end stuff that we've picked out as community representatives. Do you agree or disagree, or do you see something we might be missing that we haven't picked up?
So in relation to the prioritisation, it won't be one individual making that decision. So initially the first cut will actually be done at an executive level, just so we can do that. And then from that prioritisation, based on that that consensus view, so obviously it will be a consensus view, then that will actually, then that's the plan, as to sit there and say, okay, well, we've run it through the tool, and this is how we've actually, as a executive, prioritised the services or classified the services, not necessarily prioritise them, that we've classified them, and this is where we actually sit there and think that this is how, this is potentially a program of work that would actually come back to sit there and say this is the area that we should actually focus, and then that would actually come back obviously through to the audit committee as part of that program for that vetting. The way the tool is actually being developed and these questions is to sit there and say that you can actually go down to granular as well. So like, you know, so we're doing it at like a high level organisational perspective to sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to focus our energies in, I don't know, economic development area. And we have economic development and tourism, and like we would sit there and say, so we'll do it at that high level, and then if that's an area that essentially is agreed that is, we think that we can move it to a different quadrant, we would then potentially, then you would actually get it down to the lower level and then break it down further in those service reviews to sit there and say, because you've got some, you know, I will sit there and say, use parks and gardens. Parks and gardens, there's lots of things that you'd actually do there, and then you can bring it down that level so the people on the ground can then start doing the assessment and the service review as well. It's just the question on this is to sit there and say, okay, well, where should we focus our energies, as opposed to just everyone putting their hand up and the loudest person in the room actually saying, this is where I think, because I suspect if you went around this room and you went around the chamber, everyone would have their different viewpoints, but it's just sort of sitting there saying, okay, well, that's actually, you know, yes, we're not saying that anything that's in the high value, low cost area is free, but we shouldn't be focusing our energy on that area, those services at this point in time. We should be focusing on those low value, high cost areas. So that's the whole point of it, but it won't be one individual making that determination. It will have to be a collective process of individual scoring and then coming together and getting that consensus as to having that common understanding.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the Service Review Framework Report. We've got a mover, Christine, seconder, Mayor Redman. All in favour, carry unanimously. Yeah, a very good report, so thank you, Bentleys. So we move on to item 7.5, which is the Economic Development Strategy Implementation Audit. Sharon, did you want to say? Okay, David, do you want to intro?
Thank you, Natalie. Through the chair. So Bentleys were engaged in the middle of last year to undertake an audit of the implementation of our economic development strategy. We've presented updates to Audit and Risk in the November meeting. We also had a council member briefing in mid-November in a confidential format around it. And then we finalised the report, which is included within the agenda late December. That report has subsequently been shared with our stakeholders, Business Gawler and Regional Development Australia, Barossa Gawler, Adelaide Plains, and also internally around council staff. And we've already, as council staff, kicked off implementation of some of those recommendations and actions. noting that a lot of them are tied into 30 June as we go through the next budget iteration, especially around the proposed models around separate rate and how we attract that separate rate and how it's used. And we will be establishing a local economic development working group. There'll be a council report going up to the February council meeting about that and who we propose to be on that working group to work through what that model of economic delivery looks like for 25, 26 and beyond. And we will also be undertaking a review of the economic development strategy itself across the calendar year. So we are all full steam ahead in the implementation. The audit itself was very thorough, and I'd also like to thank Bentley's for having to be here for a different matter, but it's great they're still online for this one because it was a very thorough review, and we think we've got some really good actions to work towards in delivery of the review and getting our economic development house back in order.
Yep. Very good. Are there any questions or comments? No.
Thank you. So Peter and I, we also did this review, and it is really a comprehensive audit of the council's economic development strategy and the agreements with the two groups, GBDG, Goal Business Development Group, and RDA, the Regional Development Australia. And we looked at all reports, and we also had stakeholder meetings with 2 people from GBDG and 3 people from the RDA, like all they are responsible people from these 2 groups. So we believe the investigation, the assessment was very thorough, and we're happy to take questions.
Any questions? No? Councillor Shanks, did you have anything? You've had your briefing. You're all across it. I suppose and maybe it's a question for David, is with the recommendations, you think that that they're realistic, like it's not, we're looking at the effort and the benefit that we're going to gain from the effort that's put in. Do you think that's sort of got the right balance? Because it was a very comprehensive report.
Yeah, certainly through you, Natalie, 100%. We think that will balance out. A lot of the actions actually intertwine.
Cool.
So when you deliver one component, you're going to deliver often a lot of the recommendations at that one point in time. So that'll help with that implementation. And it's certainly something that we need to do as council, and we recognise that. So yes, we're quite comfortable with achieving, and they are realistic from our perspective.
Okay, cool. That's the only question I had. All right, so we've got an officer's recommendation. Oh, sorry. Yep, go.
Yeah, thank you.
Oops. Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, thanks. Just one more point to add to that is the audit was focused on the economic development and with those partners that have been mentioned already. But as part of the review, we also noticed that there are also other strategies within the council, including the underlying strategy for the 10-year that the council goes under. And as part of our conversations with David and the team, we felt it's important as they are developing this strategy and agreeing on the way forward, that they're also aligning to the overall direction of the council and where it's going, and so that this economic development doesn't sit as a strategy that is isolated to the broader growth of the council and the other aspirations that they have going forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, thank you. I guess for our members' benefits, I think the journey that council is undertaking in this space is a very interesting one. I think council were pretty adamant in their feedback in relation to not just dissolving the Goal Business Development Group by cutting out the rating model, more so understanding what's the modern day model that can partner with council, and whether that then gives birth to a council resource that has that economic development manager in their email signature or not, is what comes out of the work being done, opposed to what we've seen in the past on, in lack of a better term, a couple of ideas of some more white-collar workers being economic business manager without a clear direction of scoping of what those KPIs actually look like.
Yep.
And I think the partnership model has proved in local government industry time and time again, and I'm really excited to see where this one actually takes us, because I think there was a little bit of discomfort from our Gawler Business Development Group, which in short are business owners locally in our town that have their own frustrations back and forth with council historically. So trying to bridge the gap in that relationship is a body of work in itself. But I think we're starting to show a bit more understanding. We're starting to think a bit better in the space. So I think we are evolving to that readiness of what it looks like moving forward. I've heard a lot of, acceptable criticisms come about what we pay the RDA, for example. But I always play devil's advocate, and I turn around and say, well, it's easy for us to go, well, they're giving Barossa way more attention than us. But what are we requesting for RDA to do on behalf of our business community?
Yeah.
And then when you start getting into those sorts of questions, are the people in the room the qualified ones to ask those questions, or is it our business leaders? Do we rely on them? Do we understand what they're going through day by day by day? Because ultimately we get this right. Our long-term financial plan organically gets better because we get our mix of commercial ratepayers and residential ratepayers more manageable. So it's a worthy space to invest if we understand why we're investing. And I really think that we are getting to that place of understanding why we're investing. And again, I thank Bentley for the report. I think staff for actually going down the rabbit hole, because it would have been a tricky one to navigate, but now the onus is going to be on us, making sure that we really build in those relationships with our business community, and we don't alienate them, because it's not us versus them. It's, hey, we act on behalf of you. This separate rate could be used for this to better the economic growth. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Yep, that's a good point. Very good report. All right, so have I got a mover for us noting the Economic Development Strategy Implementation Audit Report? Mayor Redmond, seconder Christine, all in favour, carried unanimously. All right, thank you, Bentleys, for wonderful reports and attending tonight. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Now we'll go back up to 6.1, which is the decision reports and the mid-year budget review. Erin, did you want to talk to this?
Okay, through the chair, view of our recurrent budget. So we've had 6 months worth of operations, and we are trying to forecast the next 6 months, $750,000, which we were going to try and find efficiencies through the budget. We have made some operational gains throughout the year, so that savings target at the moment, at the end of the the mid-year budget review remains at 66,000, so that's all we've got left of that set 750, so that's fantastic. We have stripped out about $25,000 worth of new initiatives in this budget review, so none of those new initiatives or those projects that we've taken out of the budget are going to be rolled over to next year. The only one that is in conversations at the moment is the urban design framework, but the scope of that project has changed, so it's, there's going to be a budget bid for next year, so no need to worry there. We've got some additional capital revenue of $544,000, of which 496 related to the LRCIP funding from phase, I think it was 1 and 2, if I'm correct, David. that funding, just because there's been a changeover of staff and people managing those particular projects and those fundings and those acquittals, has just gone unnoticed. So that's a bit of an additional windfall for council. In the time that this report has been done, I think we've received an extra 40,000 as well. So that will go through the next budget review. We did have some additional capital expense that we had to just put through the budget as well, which was about 64,000, of which 21,000 was a non-cash adjustment. So it was just fixing up a plant hire budget that we had. So that's quite minimal. Because of all of those adjustments that we made, we've reduced our borrowings by 481,000 for the year. So that's fantastic. Just means that the net financial liabilities ratio will reduce. Operating ratio will stay the same because just the adjustments that we've made have been quite negligible, so they don't really do anything to that ratio. Again, with the asset sustainability ratio, that will remain the same as well. The operational gains that we made were from around vacant positions. We did have a look again at services and projects that we'd been doing during the year. So the last 6 months, the next 6 months, we tried to forecast based on the ability to deliver services and projects, and we've just tried to forecast where that position's going to land. We did have a few adjustments for income that we needed to make. So the adjustments for the expense and the income is all throughout the report. So there's a bit of detail in there as well about how that's all those movements are made. We have managed to any gains that we made. We were able to cover all of those unfavourable variances or unfavourable adjustments that we needed to make. And that's about it. So if you've got any questions?
Thank you. Next up question, Christine, do you want to start?
Only one. Just wondering if it's possible to improve processes so that if we're entitled to nearly $500,000 in grant money, that we can get it in quicker rather than relying, I guess, on individuals that might be absent or have resigned.
Yep, so we can do that. I would have, liked to have been around when you found it. Exciting day.
I'll just say the chair, Natalie. So we have looked at some process improvements for the managing of grants going forward. So it's definitely been on our radar.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, just quickly. We've talked about the long-term financial plan. We've talked about our new strategy, and I think it's no secret that there's been a positive shift in the way we do things. However, it's all speculative until we actually get those runs on the board. I thank you for this report, and what you're able to spruik today is about us getting those runs on the board. And it does empower elected members like myself and the Mayor to be able to go in and be able to talk to the long-term financial plan, because the savings target, had a lot of scepticism around it. I'm sure it wasn't targeted at any direct personality. It's just seeing it happen. We've never been able to see it happen in this room before. So without cutting that front of house service delivery stuff. We are seeing one of the bigger capital works, which I know keeps Wendy up at night, budget being delivered, while also focusing in and drilling in on those operational savings. And we do need to get to the point where we are reporting on these savings. We need to be able to push over the skeptics in the room and say these are operational savings. These aren't superficial moving of things on spreadsheets, and this is how we did it, and this is how it's sustainable. And that's what you're actually reporting on. So firstly, thank you. And it will be really great to see how we get to, because we're only just over halfway through this financial year and we're already looking so positive. Things happen, it'll be what it will be. But yeah, when we come in next year and we go, all right, cool, you delivered 850, let's bump that up to 900. It is the, we'll barter about that later. But yeah, no, this is, again, arming us with those milestones on delivery so that it builds the confidence of budget deliveries. And this is the essence of what we've been speaking about.
Yeah, and I agree that it's, it looks like we're heading in the right direction. We seem to have more confidence in the numbers, and there's less, except for the $500,000 surprise, which is a good surprise, luckily. We like those surprises. I feel like we've sort of got a bit more control over it. I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but just it's heading in the right direction, as Councillor Shanks said. So well done. Okay, so if we've got no more questions or comments, we've got Officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the mid-year budget review report, which one notes the FY25 mid-year budget review with no movement in the operating deficit of $1.694 million. 2, notes an increase of $214,000 in capital expenditure, an increase in capital income received of $544,000, and 3, recommends to Council that the mid-year budget review as contained in attachment 1 be adopted. I got a mover. Mayor Redman, seconder.
I'd like to congratulate Erin McGarry, Financial Business Partner, on your update. Thank you. That's it.
All right, have I got a second, Christine? All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, 6.2 is the external audit plan. Was that you again, Erin? Oh, Renee. Okay, Renee.
Okay, so Council has appointed Dean Newbury as its auditor for a 3-year term following recommendation from the committee. And this report presents to the committee the 2024-25 external audit plan. So the plan provides an overview of the planned scope and timing of the audit of internal controls in the financial statements of Council for this financial year. The interim audit, which focuses on the internal control environment, is going to be undertaken in mid-March this year, and the final audit will be focusing on Council's financial statements, will be undertaken mid-September.
Okay, thank you. Have you got any questions or comments? No, nothing from Christine. Councillor Shanks?
Sorry, just quickly. Yeah, all good. I know we endorsed this, and it's come in full cycle now, and understand the report of what they're going to be looking at and whatever else. But I always, again, drill in, and I know I sound like being a dirty horse here, but the opportunity to sit down with auditors and not only look at what their scope, but just take that advantage to say, hey, what else are you seeing in the industry? It is such a powerful thing to talk to auditors and build that relationship. I'm not telling anyone in this room what they don't already know, I know, but, using those assets that we pay good money for to not only deliver on their scope, but their appetite to actually feed you other little bits of information. Not only the body of work they complete has a value to it, but those conversations I always find the most valuable, because you spitball those ideas and they understand your workflow during that conversation that they wouldn't understand by reading it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are my only comments, and I know it's repeating myself, but I will be consistent.
Any other questions or comments? No, you're all good. I think it's good, we've got fresh eyes coming in because we've had the same auditors, and it was a 5-year contract, wasn't it? So I think it's important just to make sure that they were, that the new auditors are aware of the controls testing that was previously done, just because that was so comprehensive, and it's 5 years of data, which was so we could sort of map the improvement, which was quite good. But then, as I said, I'm looking forward to sort of a new approach, fresh eyes. So just making sure that, you know, management cooperates with them. It can be a little bit frustrating having new people in, but yeah, but then there's advantages to it as well. So, and I think looking at the audit approach, I believe that they covered all the high-risk areas. So, yeah, it'd be good to see what they come up with, not only from a financial perspective, but from, you know, an audit's findings perspective as well, and controlled efficiencies that we'll see at the end of the process. All right, so I've got a officer's recommendation that we recommend the FY25 external audit plan to council for endorsement. Do I have a mover? Christine, seconder, Councillor Shanks. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, going back to the information reports, the other ones. 7.1 is the going back to the FY24 external audit opinion. Who would want to? Sharon, is this?
This is just a procedural report, just basically providing you the actual unqualified audit opinions, just to make sure that you receive them. And they'll be presented to council at the next council meeting.
Okay, so that was issued after our last...
Yeah.
Like the timing issue, isn't it?
So it's a timing issue, and under the Act we have to provide them to council.
Okay, cool. All right, any questions, comments? Makes sense, okay. So officer's recommendation that the FY24 general purpose financial statements and internal controls, that should be letters, be received and noted. Oh, opinion, sorry, it's at the front. If I could read, it'd be good. Do I have a mover? Mayor Redmond, seconder. Christine, thank you. All in favour? Carry unanimously. Going too fast. Getting the speed wobbles. All right. Item 7.2 is the Treasury Management Report. Do I have a speaker for that one? Erin?
Okay, through the chair, this is just an update to the Treasury Management Discussion Report that we put, I think, in February last year. It was requested that this become a standing report in the Audit Committee, Audit and Risk Committee agenda, just to give you all a overview of the loan borrowings and our Treasury management in the quarter. I guess we have these quarterly meetings, so this is just an update, just to we've got a breakdown of all of the loans and the outstanding balances, but also we provide the debt portfolio, so we the ratio of loans between fixed and variable, just to make sure that we're complying with the policy.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Christine?
This is just little stuff. So on page 52, in the cash advance facility section, there's a CA 108 that's got a maturity date of 2024. So I'm just wondering if that was a typo, or has it been rolled over, or what's the story with that one?
I imagine it's a typo, Christine.
That was it. So they're putting things in there for you, Christine. Because Christine picks up everything, just a warning for everyone going forward. That nothing misses her. I know, I'm impressed. I didn't even see that, so yeah, no, well done. I know. Attention for detail's insane. What was my question with this one? So this is, to summarise the report, where you're saying that, you know, we're heading in the right direction. I know that we wanted to keep it monitored, because I think, you know, from a year ago we raised it and saying we just want to keep updated because we felt like we weren't on top of the situation, like the Treasury situation. So basically, it hasn't, I'm just trying to do sort of like, you know, the high level summary, it hasn't changed that much, and we're consistent with our policy and where we want to be. Is that right? Have I interpreted that correctly? Sharon's going to...
Yeah, so obviously the coming from the discussion that we had last year regarding our debt limits and borrowings and all that sort of stuff, that's where it is. I think that we're probably a bit ahead of, like we probably haven't drawn down as much borrowings as we actually anticipated, so we are actually managing the cash flow a lot better than was forecast. When we had that, was having that discussion about increasing the debt facility because we probably expected to have exceeded our current limit. So we are managing that cash flow. So hopefully we can still manage that through to the end of the financial year as well and not have that increase too much. But we do have the new facility that's actually in place. And there are those covenants that have been put against those that new facility, in the sense that I think the objective or the covenants is to sit there and say that we have to actually be back into an operating surplus position by 2028. So obviously the LGFA have given us probably a bit more grace than what we've actually given ourselves internally. But we have to continue to monitor these ratios and I suppose deliver on our long-term financial plan as well. So that's those constraints around that additional facility. So we will need to continue to make sure that we're meeting those covenants that they've placed on that additional facility.
Okay. Councillor Shanks.
And sorry for my naivety. The new facility, could that new facility be added in? It is? Oh, it's in the total. Oh, okay, sorry.
It's the total available. So you can see there's a gap there between the 15 and the 25.
And the 15. Yeah, gotcha. Yep, so that's that 15. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Cool. All right, well, if there's no more questions or comments, no. We've got an officer's recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the Treasury Management Report as at 31 December 2024. I've got a mover, Councillor Shanks, seconder, Mayor Redman, all in favour, carried unanimously. All right, 7.3 is the FY26 budget parameters and timetable. Sharon, did you want to...
Through you, Natalie. Again, this is just for information for the committee, just to let you know I suppose the parameters that are being provided to, I suppose endorsed by the council and provided to staff for the development of the 25-26 budget. I suppose the biggest thing in relation to it, it's still got those underlying themes, so it's that have been set out in the long-term financial plan, making sure that we focus on that expenditure control and probably that renewal, making sure that renewal gap is closed, while also trying to achieve the operating results that have actually been set out in the annual business plan. So yeah, and then there's just basically the timetable. We'll point out to council, to the committee, so next Thursday we are actually having one of our first pre-engagement sessions. So we're having a community drop-in session. That's the intent is to allow the community to provide some feedback upfront about what sort of projects that they are looking for. Initially, the focus of that was probably more around the participatory budgeting initiative, but we've probably expanded it to doing a bit of an education process, as well as providing information to the community as what we've actually done what we've delivered in past budgets and what they get for their rates. So it's probably more of a yes, come and have you tell us what you want to see, where you want us to put our priorities, but it's also a bit of a this is what we've done in the past as well, so people can actually see where their rates do go and what we've actually delivered, because sometimes they're not necessarily as visual. So that's something that we've introduced this year. And then everything else is pretty much stock standard. There is the special audit committee meeting on April the 1st. See how we go there. And that's where we'll present the draft budget. And then obviously we'll continue on like what we did last year and have that information session following that, meeting with the council members, so you can also provide your feedback directly to community, the council members as well as a whole. So yeah. Yep, so here we go.
Fingers crossed. Are there any questions or comments? No? All good? No? I think it's, as you said, it's very important just to make sure that it all gels together with the long-term financial plan. I think we're very clear on the direction that we want to go, with the amount of work that we did on the budget last year. So, hopefully all that groundwork will help with this year's process. So fingers crossed it should be quite straightforward. Hopefully. All right, so the officer's recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the budget parameters, assumptions and budget timetable as set out in the report for the purpose of developing the draft FY26 budget. Have I got a mover? Christine, seconder, Mayor Redman, all in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, so we've done 7.4 and 7.5. Going for a record tonight. 7.6 is the policy governance framework. Scroll down. On page, there we are, 132. We've got Susie. Hello Susie, welcome. Would you like to talk to this item?
Through you. This has been a little while in the development of this initial draft of a policy governance framework to provide a consistent process across the organisation for all of our policy documents. Irrespective of the fact that some are overdue for review have taken time to develop this document because they still are in effect. And the next steps moving on from this first iteration that has been presented to executive is the team are currently working on putting together we've got the list of all the policies, we think, policies, procedures, codes, I think there's 179, if my memory serves me correctly. So we're doing a desktop audit of all of those in relation to whether or not they're still, if they're required, or if there's some that could be amalgamated, if they're no longer required, putting recommendations, if they're no longer required, it might be to revoke. And also cross-checking with all the legislative ones that we are required to have, that we're not missing any. Putting that all in a big register on our SharePoint site, so we can extract it into Excel, filter all of that sort of thing, with a view to putting forward the desktop results of the desktop audit and a bit of a draft schedule, with a focus being to first get the policies, procedures, codes that are overdue for review, get those dealt with first, and then we'll move on. So if there's any questions specific to this initial iteration of the document, I'm sure it will evolve as time goes on, and particularly once it's applied. I think the application of a framework like this, once you do the practical steps, you then can work to improve it, because some bits will work well, some might not. At least that's been my experience in this space.
Yep, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Christine?
I think the framework's fine, but when I was reading this, I was thinking this is a mountain of work to do. So just wondering, are there enough resources to do this project, not only in governance, but I see you're trying to also make the executive managers responsible as well. And would it be of any use to look at what other councils have done to see if you can plagiarise some policies to decrease the amount of work?
Susie?
Through you again, Natalie, as the chair. I've been through this exercise once before at a previous council, and that came about as the result of a evaluation into the practices and processes and policies at the City of Playford. And the ICAC Commissioner handed down a report with multiple recommendations. So I have based a lot of it, I guess, from that point onwards, as well as the policy officers network in local government is very strong, and we do share a lot of this throughout the network. We have LGA templates that we can also call on. Some of those have been reviewed with more contemporary practice. Some are still a little bit dated. So we tend to, as governance staff across the board, liaise quite heavily through our network and share the different policies, codes. So definitely not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Is that see whether you borrow and steal off other organisations, and also I like it's the approach, and obviously this is not your first time doing it, and making sure that there's more than one procedure coming off a policy, because when you have one policy, one procedure, one guideline, you need to get them, and just cull, like if you don't need that many policies and procedures, so combine them and just be smart about it. Cool. Are there any other councillor Shanks?
I think we say working with our counterparts opposed to plagiarising. Look, I think this is a really good example of, you probably hear this sentiment out there, so much red tape, bureaucracy, red tape gone mad. This is one of the symptoms, I guess, of, something hasn't gone our way. All right, well, we need to develop a policy so we avoid that next time. Something hasn't gone our way, we better develop a policy and avoid bang, 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 bang. So it's just layer, 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 layer. Whereas, the more modern day technique is that review and update. And if something is out of date or it can't evolve or it can't be updated, you do throw it out and start again.
Yeah.
It is a massive body of work now, absolutely. But I like the sentiment of looking at it, because if we don't look at it, we'll keep on following the same sort of mentality, and realistically, some of these policies, some of these procedures that we see quoted back to us, you go, well, is that even okay? We'll run with it, but we need to get back to the baseline because we've lost control of it at this point in time, and it is handy to understand that we are looking and we are trying to figure out to pick up those efficiencies, because you're right, the policy that has the procedure that then ultimately leads to the boots on ground action, if not up to date, the action won't be up to date.
Yeah.
And then that trickles all the way back to efficiency and spending, and it all links quite hard. So
yeah, and I think while you were reviewing the policies and procedures, keeping the back of your mind, like we've done a whole lot of risk work as well, and also probably stating the obvious, but something came to my attention this week at work is that the delegations as well. Just because Chris has got delegation to approve everything, he shouldn't be approving everything. He should only be approving what is above the next level down in his delegation. And I think that was probably something that came to my attention this week, is that you want to make sure that everything is pushed down, whether it's based on the risk framework or risk profile or delegations. Chris should not be authorising stuff that can be authorised by someone else, if that makes sense. Yeah. Oops, that's me.
Sorry about that. Through you again, just to respond to that, I've just been working in Wendy's area, actually, having a look at all of the delegations now that there's a new manager of infrastructure. It was one of the tasks he was very keen to make sure that the delegations with his direct reports and whatnot, that it was all consistent with what he had, and then, you know, to provide that support to Wendy if she doesn't need to be processing and approving on multiple every invoice that comes in that area, then that's what needs to be done. So yeah, very cognizant of that.
Cool. Awesome. All right, any other comments, questions? No, we're all good. So the office's recommendation is that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the development of the policy governance framework as contained within attachment 1 and implementation plan to address policies overdue for review. I've got a mover. Mayor Redmond, seconder, Christine. You need to smile when you do that, Christine. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. Item 8 was items listed for discussion. There were no items. Item 9 was questions without notice. There's no questions. And item 10's motions without notice. No motions. And so item 11 is to close the meeting at 8:04. I reckon that's a record. And our next meeting's on Tuesday the 6th of May, which will be here before we know it. Oh, sorry, 1st of April is the next, so the next ordinary one's 6th and the... Oh yeah, no, we can. Yep. All right, thank you all.